Nobody tells you about this part. The part after the conversation is over, you walked away, or they did, and somehow they're still talking, inside your head, hours later, days later, sometimes years later. You replay what you said, what you should have said, what they'd say back, a conversation that never happened, with someone you're trying to forget. And here's the cruel part. The more you try to ignore them, the louder they get. You wonder if something is wrong with you, why you can't just let go, why a person who hurt you still has this kind of access. Nothing is wrong with you, but what's happening inside you is not what you think it is. Most people think they're attached to the person. They're not. They're attached to the cycle, the argument, the silence, the apology, the warmth, then the argument again. B.F. Skinner discovered something in the 1950s that nobody thought applied to human relationships. He put a rat in a box, gave it a lever, rewarded it sometimes, not always, not predictably, sometimes. That rat pressed the lever more obsessively than any rat that got rewarded every time. Skinner called it intermittent reinforcement. We call it a slot machine. Casinos didn't invent it, they just studied it, and so did the person you're trying to forget. Not consciously, maybe, but the pattern is identical. Hot and cold, kind and cruel, unpredictable reward is the strongest leash ever built. There's a reason it's always the good ones, the empathetic ones, the ones who feel too much, the ones who think, maybe I'm the problem. Psychologists call it fog, fear, obligation, guilt, fear of what happens if you leave, guilt for having needs in the first place. Your empathy is not a flaw, but in the wrong hands, it becomes a handle. They grip it and pull. How many times have you said it? I just need one honest conversation. If I can just explain my side, if they could just hear me, then I can move on. In 1957, Leon Festinger gave this feeling a name: cognitive dissonance, the unbearable tension between what you believed about this person and what they actually turned out to be. Your brain cannot hold both versions at once, so it searches, desperately, for a conversation that makes it make sense. You're not seeking truth, you're seeking relief. And relief is exactly what they will never give you. Because the confusion is not an accident. The confusion is the strategy. Now we need to talk about what they actually want. It's not love. It's not even respect. It's supply, attention, reaction, emotional energy, control. It doesn't have to be positive. Your anger is supply. Your tears are supply. Your silence, when it carries pain, is supply. Every time you argued back, you handed them exactly what they came for. Every time you tried to explain yourself, every time you defended your character, every time you begged them to just listen, you were feeding the machine. So you decide to stop. You go quiet. No reply, no reaction, nothing. And then they get worse. The calls increase, the messages increase, the guilt trips multiply. Suddenly they're kinder than they've ever been. And your brain says, see, this is my fault. This is what happens when I pull away. It is not your fault. Behavioral science calls this an extinction burst. When the slot machine stops paying, the gambler doesn't walk away calmly. They press harder, faster, more desperately. That surge of intensity is not proof you matter to them. It is proof the machine stopped paying. Stay quiet through the burst. That's where most people break. That's exactly what they're counting on. There are 4 ways out. Each one works differently. Each one has a cost. The first is gray rock. Imagine being boring. Deliberately, completely, aggressively boring. They say something designed to provoke. You say, okay. They push further. You say, no heat, no color, no reaction. You become a gray rock, unremarkable, unrewarding, invisible to a predator looking for prey. The second is no contact, full extinction, block, delete, disappear, not as punishment, not as revenge, as surgery. Clinicians who work with abuse survivors describe going no contact as coming off a drug. There will be withdrawals. Your body will crave contact. Your mind will manufacture reasons to reach out. Do not negotiate with the craving. The third is assertive boundaries, for when complete silence isn't possible. When they push, I'll think about it. When they escalate, we can talk when it's calm. When they cross the line, you leave the room. No argument, no explanation. You simply exit. Research from cognitive behavioral therapy shows that consistently enforced limits change the dynamic of abusive interactions. The fourth is the one nobody talks about enough: self-compassion. Kristen Neff spent years studying what actually helps people recover from psychological harm. And it was not strength. It was not discipline. It was treating yourself the way you would treat a friend in pain. Journal what happened. not to understand them, to understand you, to counter the gaslighting with your own record of events, to remember what was real when their version tried to replace it. The guilt you feel for protecting yourself, that guilt was installed by the person you're protecting yourself from. Here's what all 4 of those techniques have in common. They're not about ignoring someone. They're about becoming someone their opinion no longer reaches. Ignoring is still a reaction, a careful, deliberate, aching reaction. You're still listening. You're just not responding. Indifference is different. Indifference is when the call comes through and your nervous system doesn't spike, when their approval stops being a currency you trade in. You didn't beat them. You outgrew them. And the strange thing about outgrowing someone is that you don't feel it as triumph. You feel it as quiet. A quiet you forgot was possible.